This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We should be.
Comment ça va?
Comment ça va?
Those are all the French that I know.
I was about to go a little bit further, but now that you've given us that caveat, we will stick with that maintenant. Our voyage at some point, our raison d'être at some point, is to then be able to figure out what XN stands for.
Many have tried.
Many have tried and many have failed.
And you will fail.
One can try and maybe even try to be charming to see if we can get it out of you, but it seems that that may not work this morning.
Let's focus on economic issues.
Let's focus on economic issues. We'll do that in just a minute. After we focus on what the people from the Kingdom of Eswatini share with us this morning in terms of a proverb, and we'd love to get your thoughts on how you would interpret that. That's where we are this week. The Kingdom of Eswatini, one of the two countries that's completely surrounded by South Africa, the other being Lesotho. But this is the proverb for today. Only a fool tests the depth of a river with both feet. Only a fool tests the depth of a river with both feet. I see you smile.
Yes, because I am conversant with a popular proverb around, and the proverb says, if I can remember very well, silent rivers run deep. So if you don't know how deep a river is, please don't test it with both legs, because chances of being carried away are very high. So the Eswatini proverb is very relevant. Before you take a very dangerous gamble, before you invest a lot of money, you take any serious decision, test it.
Test it first.
That is the message we are being given. I've never been to Eswatini, but I've been very close there, into the kingdom of Zululand. And I was very surprised that when it comes to marriage, the Zulu royalties prefer to marry from not Zulu themselves, but they go to either Lesotho or Eswatini.
Interesting.
I think they understand genetics very well. But don't ask me what I was doing in the Zulu kingdom.
That is why you are the economist, and we will leave it at
For another day.
For another day. So the Africa Forward Summit took place over the last couple of days, and that came to an end yesterday with a thrilling remark from the President of Kenya, President William Ruto, who insisted yet again about how there needed to be fair play when it came to global financing, and how Africa is not asking for a seat at the table anymore, but that is at the table and making the rules. Okay, sounds great. But then let's look at some of the agreements that were made during this summit and whether they actually look in the proper direction. A lot of people are talking about the thought that Africa's nations need to be economy facing. And if they're not economy building facing, then we are wasting time. The Nairobi commuter rail upgrade, about 12.5 billion shillings. There's some of the major agreements that investment deals signed between William Ruto and Emmanuel Macron during Macron's visit to Kenya and the Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi over the last couple of days. 12.5 billion shillings for rehabilitation and modernization of the Nairobi commuter rail lines, linking areas such as Syokimau, Embakasi, Roiro, Kikuyu, and the Ruta Ngong corridor. $800 million, that's about 904 billion shillings. Port Logistics and Infrastructure, JV, partnership involving logistics and cargo infrastructure connected to the port of Mombasa. French shipping giant CMA-CGM announced plans to renovate terminals at the port of Mombasa, with investments reportedly reaching 700 million euro. Energy and climate, the Kipeto wind farm expansion, additional 100 megawatts wind power expansion worth around $250 million. National Electricity Control Center agreement for construction of a new electricity control center aimed at improving grid reliability. We keep going on and on. XN, Masinga Dam rehabilitation, nuclear cooperation, which Ochanda is very excited about, sustainable aviation fuel, digital and technology, agriculture and trade, 5.6 billion shilling engineering and science complex at the University of Nairobi, plus technical equipment support for 4 Kenyan universities, health and blue economy, broader investment commitments to the tune of 1 billion euro in Kenya-focused investments. All of these were inked. I mean, it goes into the detail, but you get the main picture, and I'm sure you looked into some of these. the very simple question when we're talking about nations needing to be economy facing. These are good things, are they not?
I think they are good things, but it depends on who you are.
Okay.
If you look at the list, it's quite long.
Very long. This is what I've done is not even scratch the surface.
Yes, in fact, we can spend the next 30 minutes just looking at the list itself.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good statement that we should be economy facing. Because when KK or Kenya Kwanza government came to power, that was our dream. That we should put politics at the back and the economics at the front. But that has not really happened. The question should be, and maybe the first question in our discussion should be, what would China or the UK or the US and other big economic powers say about this investment program? Because French are not in Kenya alone. A lot of other people are here.
Yes.
The Chinese have been here, big, with the SGR, with the expressway, with the port of Ramu, and very many other projects. So I think French have come to compete with other people who are deeply entrenched here. And I would like to know their reaction. But if you look at all these projects, if they are implemented, I think would have an effect. But the big question I should be asking is, we know yesterday and the day before yesterday, the 2-day summit, we know there are some people who benefited.
Yes.
If you own a Uber transport company, if you own a hotel, they really did very well because of the demand for those services. So there were benefits in the short run. So the big question we should be asking is, if all these projects are implemented, who will benefit in the long run? And the question should be the common mwananchi. That should be the starting point. If we implement all these projects, port logistics, energy control center, AI, agriculture, UN, new building, and blue economy, how would the ordinary Kenyan benefit? Because I've been interacting with other countries that have been investing here. The ones I've mentioned, the US, UAE, Turkey, China, and so on. But has the ordinary Kenyan felt that? So the best test of this summit, whether it was successful or not, is to find out if Wanjiku, as we try to use it, is the word we use all the time, is to find out if Wanjiku will feel it. If I go to Kakamega, if I go to Shamahoho, if I go to Meru, if I go to Machakos, 1 or 2 years from now, and they start saying, I think there are more jobs for us. I think our agricultural products have a market. As before I came here, I was sitting outside here, and I remember seeing on one of the WhatsApp groups, somebody from Bonanga sent a message. In fact, it was an SOS message. And he was saying, I have 3 tons of avocados that I need to take to the market. 3 tons of avocados I need to go to the market. So the test of pudding is eating. And let's see how ordinary Kenyans are going to benefit from this summit. That's my take.
Off the top of your head, do you see from this how ordinary Kenyans will benefit as a result of this summit?
Maybe in the long run.
Okay.
Maybe in the long run, but not the short run. Because when you talk about port logistics, we know ports need to be efficient. So if they're efficient, then we expect the cost of goods and services to go down. Because it will take less time to come, it will be faster, and we need to see that reflected in the prices. Because one of the big costs of goods and services is transport. So we hope we are going to see that. Now, when you talk about energy control center, we expect to have less blackouts. I've been suffering from blackouts in the last 1 month. I hope there will be less of that. When you talk of nuclear energy, I hope the price of energy is going to go down because the supply will go up. Because we have an interesting energy market in Kenya where more energy is supplied, but the price does not go down. Because of, people like independent power producers and so on. Agriculture is the mainstay of this economy. So will Kenyan farmers have bigger markets in France or European Union? So that if I have potatoes, if I have avocados, if I have tea, if I have coffee, I have a market for it. Now, my biggest concern is I was looking at the trade between Kenya and France.
Yeah.
And I was finding out what do we export there. It's raw materials, coffee, tea, cut flowers, spices. But when you check what we import from France, it is
finished products. Yes.
Perfumes, chemicals, machinery, wine, and such things. So are we going to have this imbalance corrected? So my answer is, in the long run, if this is implemented, we want the ordinary Kenyans to feel it. Maybe not people like me and you.
Prof, if I could jump in before you get deep into the discussion. Is this between President Ruto and President Macron, or is it between France and Kenya and Africa by extension? And then, we had this discussion yesterday, and there's no harm in repeating this question. Governments exist in perpetuity and for posterity. What guarantee do we have? Remember that Macron is leaving office next year, 2027. President Ruto is seeking re-election next year. And it's not cast on stone that he will be re-elected. Of course, he might be re-elected. Remember that when President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2020 inked some deal with the French to construct the Rironimau summit at a cost of 150 billion to 200 billion, it never materialized because the President Ruto's administration cancelled that deal. We incurred some costs to avoid some litigation in London. What guarantee do you have that these several deals inked will actually materialize, will actually see the light of day?
I saw that coming. In fact, one of the things I was very eager in this summit, which I didn't come out, I didn't get it, is the French reaction to the cancellation of that project. It was a big project. And I thought that finally, when we talk of big projects, the French had the foot on the door, but it was cancelled. And maybe one of the things I would wanted to know is if I overheard, maybe without them knowing, President Ruto and President Macron discussing about that project, I would really have wanted to know what they discussed. Back to your question. I think this is the biggest problem that we have in this country, that our economics is tied to political cycles. So I have my 5 years as president, my 5 years as an MP, my 5 years as a woman is going to carry these projects around. But it's a big if, because every president who comes has his own or her own projects. I'm using her because we still haven't had a female president in Kenya, and I think I would like us to have one just to see the difference after 60 years. So there's no guarantee this one will go up to the end, but we hope they can, because they look, from the paper, they look very good projects, and they would benefit majority of Kenyans. Again, we hope that they will be carried through.
Is it between President Ruto and President Macron in individual capacity? Because remember that President Macron is looking for credibility in Europe. President William Ruto appears to be arrived at the political scene and, of course, the global scene, the global stage with a lot of gusto. And he appears to be resetting the configuration of the African setup. Is it between the two individuals or between the two countries and the continent by extension?
If you remember when President Ruto got into power, he tried to front his credentials up as a Pan-Africanist. And I think I would see this conference in the same perspective, that he still believes that he has Pan-African credentials. So both Macron and President Ruto had a chance to showcase their global reach, their global network. And that's why you kept on hearing that presidents are coming, that president are coming. So for the purpose of politics, I think it was good for President Ruto, because he is telling Kenyans, my Pan-African credentials are still there. I'm not alone. I'm not isolated. Because after 2024 protests, there was a backlash against Kenya. So he is trying to build new bridges. Now for President Macron, I think he's the greatest beneficiary, because France has not been having very good image in West Africa. They are withdrawing from a lot of countries or being chased away, whichever way you look at it. So to get a new footing in an English-speaking country, that was a coup for Macron. So for Macron, I would say he was a beneficiary because of that. And that's why I was asking earlier, what would France or China, not France, but what would the UK or China say about this? Because it was unusual to have a Francophone conference in an English-speaking country. And I also see it in a different perspective. For a long time, Rwanda was the linchpin of French influence in this country, because they speak French and Burundi. But now, if you go to Rwanda for a conference, you speak in English. So maybe the French are realizing that Kenya could be another starting point. Remember, French also have a lot of interest in the Indian Ocean, Comoros, and places like Madagascar. So Kenya would be a very good bridge between the East and West. But to cut the story short, I think the conference, if you look at the list you have put here, the summit, the list you have put here about the projects that would be implemented, I would say it is between Kenya and France. But if you look at it from a political angle, it was between President Ruto and President Macron.
Right.
And both of them, I'm sure they have something to gain from there. Remember, by bringing all those presidents here, President Macron had a chance to reach out to them. You know, I don't know whether you are married, but the best way to get somebody to marry you and to get closer to you would be to take that person out. maybe in a cafe or for a trip to Mombasa or somewhere else. The conversation changes. So when you get this West African president and bring them to Kenya, I'm sure the conversation would be very different if the conversation was taking place in West Africa. And I think that was the coup that I'm saying President Macron had on those presidents. I'm sure they talked a different language in Kenya as compared to when they were in West Africa elsewhere.
And the French can talk a good game when they take you out, that's for sure.
Yes.
I have not been a victim of them, but I know they are good enough.
Okay, so there's one thing that we look specifically at here, which is basically the talk of the town at the moment with all of this, that it just so happens that a cancelled project for the Mao Summit Rironi Road that is currently under construction in Kenya, under a different partnership, a different project, was cancelled. And now 7 billion shillings is actually being paid to the French for the cancellation of the contract. That same project is now being spent on in Kenya at the moment. I am trying to link this to the economy. Oftentimes we say, well, the economy is growing and we see it growing at a macro level and we say that inflation is down and that we've grown by, certain number of percentage points. Most of us don't even know what those things mean. At the end of the day, the economy is growing. If I have a shilling in my pocket and I've had a meal, that's when I know that the economy works, isn't it?
Or if I've saved some money, most important.
Right. How do you translate that which we see in these mega projects? This major highway is being built, for example, 7 billion shillings down the potty because, for whatever reason, somebody decided to cancel the contract. How do all of these things actually affect me? When we talk about that project, for example, as one of the ones that takes on this big chunk of change.
That's a very hard question, but let's start from the beginning. Paying somebody 7 billion for cancelling a project. I think I would like to become a contractor to be getting free money for doing nothing. Can you imagine being paid 7 billion for doing nothing? But that's the nature of contracts. That there is a lot of money tied in the contract itself. That if you do this is what will happen. So I think Kenya avoided being dragged into deeper legal issues by just paying that. But you can see the French are also recovering because they are bringing more money, 12.5 billion in making the commuter rail. So what I suspect is that behind the scenes, there was some negotiation that you cancelled this, but you can't give us this. But I still don't understand why that project was cancelled. To me, that was quite surprising.
Yeah.
Particularly knowing that it was, particularly if you consider the amount that was involved. Particularly if you consider the importance of that project. But one suspicion is that it is who signed it. It was a different president.
Yes.
And a new president wanted to be associated with
legacy project.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a way to look at it. Now back to your hard question. I was actually looking for time to think
All right.
about it. Because it's a question everybody has been asking me, including my relatives, my friends, that if the economy is growing, why am I not feeling it?
Yeah.
So there's a time I passed around Girugin. I was going to Naivasha. And I found some young girls and boys, young men and women selling yogurt on the side of the road. And they told me that there used to be more money during Kanu era than now. And that was surprising to me. So I asked them, what do you mean? They told me, around that time, there was always some money, people buying yogurt from us and so on. They told me now we don't have. In fact, they have been removed from that place. So when you have big projects like SGR, highways, superhighways, and so on. The economic expectation is that when you build this road, there are two ways people invest. In the short run, you employ people. People who build the roads, people who supply those products, and so on. So the economy is stimulated by these big projects. That's what John Maynard Keynes talked about almost 100 years ago, the stimulation effect of the government expenditure. So when you have such projects, people benefit immediately. But we hope that in the long run, more people will benefit. Because if you're an investor, it becomes easier for you to transport your goods and services.
Yeah.
If you're a farmer, if you are doing any business, it becomes easier. So the cost of transport goes down. And if the cost of transport goes down, you take less time to do what you are doing, then the economy becomes more productive and everybody benefits.
Right. So
in the short run, very few people benefit. But in the long run, more people benefit. And that is why such projects should not be tied to politics. They should be tied to economic reality. So, for example, the road from Rironi to Mau Summit, we know definitely many people will benefit.
Yeah.
People from Narok, people from Western Kenya, people from Sudan, people from Uganda, people from Laikipia, people benefit. So it's a viable project. But the question is, as it is being constructed, are the people along that road thinking of what they will transport? Because a road can be there, but if you have nothing to transport or
you're not going to use it.
it doesn't benefit you.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that as we have these projects, the government is also looking at the multiplier effect. That this road is built, what are you going to do as a farmer? What are you going to do as a constructor? What are you going to do as an importer? So that at the end of the day, we all benefit from that.
Right.
The question is convincing politicians and convincing people like you and me that we shall benefit in the long run when the economists say we shall all be dead.
What would it take then? Because, I mean, these, as we say from this list, these are fantastic projects. They're great things. I mean, who wouldn't want their blue economy to survive or thrive, rather? Who wouldn't want health, commuter rail? Who wouldn't want things like, great digital hub at the University of Nairobi? Who wouldn't want that? But it's like going for plastic surgery when you need a triple bypass. That's what it sounds like to me.
See, my biggest concern is these projects are between France and Kenya. And they are imposed from bottom up. Because that's why it was a summit. The question is, if you ask Kenyans in the counties, what would they have wanted?
Right.
And that's the great disconnect between what politicians at the top want, what French want, and what people on the ground want. And they want what you have said. They want money in their pocket. And whether this project will be successful or not, whether the Mau Summit Road or SGR will be successful, depends on whether people will have money in their pockets. Because most Kenyans were not even following this summit. They don't know what was the discussion, but at the end of the day, they will be asking, can I get some money? Will I be able to pay my school fees? Will I be able to pay my medical services? So that connection is what we need. That what people at the top think and what people at the bottom think, there's some convergence. And they see the benefits. And the other question we should be asking is, are we changing the economic environment so that I am able now to see the use of SDR, the use of that expressway, so that I'm a farmer, I become a better farmer. So if I'm working in a mining industry, I'm also mining better. If I'm a student, I realize now I need to work harder because when I finish school, there will be some work for me.
Right.
So we need to see, people need to see the future. And again, that's why I was talking about Vision 2030, that any big project we come up with should be part of a bigger picture like Vision 2030 and so on. It will not be interpreted by politicians.
Maybe, Prof, looking at it broadly, the heads of state now imploring President Macron and pushing for easy access to credit. Are we about to see a total shift in terms of economic dealing with remember that China has made great inroads in some countries in Africa. We've seen USA, we've seen our president saying that he's not looking east or west, but he must be looking somewhere. Are we about to see some total shift in terms of economic dealing?
Let's start with something you have mentioned that is very important, that these countries want easy access to credit so that you can get cheaper interest rates if you get a loan from China, from France, or wherever you get it. I think that is very important for countries because most countries run a deficit, so they're always borrowing money. But even before we go to that, we need to find out or to ask, are we getting easy credit as citizens of this country? Because one of the biggest innovations, or one of the biggest observations we made when Kibaki came to power, and people can contest that economically he did quite well, was easy access to credit. And that's why the economy did very well. If you have a project, you wanted money, it was very easy to get. That's when we found people hawking loans on the streets of Nairobi. So let's not just think about governments getting access to credit, but also individuals like you and me. When I looked at 2026 economic survey, one of the things that surprised me is the liquidity of the banks. They have a lot of money that they are not borrowing, or they are not lending because people don't feel that they are confident enough to borrow money and they invest. So on the architecture of economics, I think there has been a big shift since there has been a big push since President Ruto came to power for a new global financial architecture.
Yes.
Because he says that it is skewed against Africa, which is true because if you look at the reserve currency, if you look at who borrows and who is rent, if you look at who pays interest rates, it's normally the less developed countries. But remember the global architecture that we have today, financial architecture, have been there since World War II, end of World War II. The Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and so on. So the only way to reduce the effect or the power of that architecture is to come up with a counterweight. So like now the US has a counterweight, which is China. Because as the president says, he's neither facing east or facing west. Because he has a choice.
He has a choice.
There was a time there was no choice. You could either face one or the other.
Right.
So if we have to reduce the effect of these global economic players, World Bank, IMF, US, and the rest, we need to counterweight. But if I ask you, what is a counterweight to IMF? What is a counterweight to World Bank? What's a counterweight to all these big institutions? So unless they have a counterweight, their power will continue. So I think President Ruto has a good dream that we need a more playing field in a global financial architecture, but so far we don't have any counterweight to the big players. And we hope, people have been talking about BRIC and so on, but so far we still have the dollar, the euro as the key reserve currencies, not the yuan or the dirham and the rest, not yet. The question is, who is going to bail the cat?
Indeed.
Is it President Ruto?
Who is it President Ruto? Because the way he talks, it's like he's actually the new entrant. He's fairly new because you can see Museveni have been here for 40 years. We've seen Kagame, he's now doing more than 20 years. We've seen all the other presidents. Samia, the president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu, is new, but she's a bit reserved. She's not really going out. But President William Ruto is sort of really going by the bull's horns.
Since he became the president.
He became the president, and not more than 2 months after that, he held the first climate summit in Nairobi and started having this conversation about the global financing architecture and was insistent on some of these things.
So it has been consistent.
He has been consistent there.
And you even remember he was so critical of the conglomeration of countries being hosted, African countries being hosted by one European country. He was saying, come to Africa. Macron is the first to come.
That's why I said it was from optics and everything. This was a good move.
It was strategic.
But remember, we have been hosted by Japan, by Korea, by Russia, by US. We're always being hosted by somebody else. So, and that's a part of the architecture he's talking about. That other people define our economic and political trajectory. Maybe it's the time we did that. But I think for us to be successful, we need maybe some counterweights.
Yes.
And I have two big questions, Prof. We'll park so we'll start with one, and then you must remind me. I must ask the heavyweight question after that. Maybe a counterweight is actually dealing with the economy of particular nations. We've seen that Ndaitwa in Namibia has done it. Over the last couple of months, they have been now declared debt-free. They have no external debt. They've paid it up. So they're at a position whereby nobody is dangling any kind of carrot. Burkina Faso is well on its way to doing the same thing. And it's not even their president. It's an interim administration under Traore. That's one thing we often forget. He's not even an elected president. But they've shown that some things can be done. So whereby we're saying that the game must be played when the direction in which you're looking at in terms of development aid and assistance is the measure. Could there be a third entrant into this game where it's saying, how about you are then looking insular, fixing your fiscal issues, paying off your debt, and then remaining reliant? Could that be an entrant in this game?
But we have been there.
Who?
Us. If you remember, during Kibaki era, we had forgotten about IMF, if you remember. In fact, about 95% of our budget was from us. Tax went up and so on. So we have been there before, and we can do that. So what was the big problem in Africa is that any time we think of any big reform, economic or politically, we always look outside. We don't look inside. So, for example, if we dealt with corruption in this country mercilessly and without favoritism, I'm sure by the end of this year, we should not need any money from IMF or from World Bank. There's a lot of money that is wasted on nepotism and so on. So before we even, charity starts at home.
It does.
Before we think about France and others who are going to help us, can we do that ourselves? So I agree with you, there's a third way, and that way is standing inside, prospecting yourself, finding out where things are going wrong, and correcting them. So if a company is having a problem, the starting point should not be blaming the customers and competitors. It is an introspection. What can we change inside this company before we look outside? And that's what the African countries have failed. So if you look at those 30 African countries that came for this summit and you analyze their economy, I'm sure you find something that they can improve immediately without talking to France, without talking to China, without talking to everybody. But we are very unwilling to reform inside because of vested interest. Because if we reformed, some people would lose their influence. Some companies would go bankrupt and so on. So I totally agree with you that before we think of what others can do, let's see what we can do for ourselves. Namibia, Burkina Faso and others. And I've given you an example of during Kibaki era when IMF was becoming relevant.
But it was
so
possible.
We can do it.
And even those that we looked to, and that's the other question here, is that during this summit, very few of us, and maybe there were those who did and were silent, actually looked at this person who's coming to offer you their hand in marriage. In my village, we normally say the person who comes to say they want to marry you, they say, thank you very much, you have come. So what they do before you actually come for the visit is that they send emissaries to your village to find out if there's poverty in your house, if there's madness, if there's something wrong with you people. So which emissaries were actually looking at France's problem? That France is is the second largest economy in Europe, but is suffering from a heavy tax issue. Their economy has been tanking over the last 10 years. There is there's lack of investor confidence. There's, of course, a political gridlock where Le Pen wanted to come in and change things, essentially. There's a cry for renewed nationalism whereby, Macron is trying to leave a legacy where he's saying we've actually made this come true with a lot of other countries in the world. There are protests on the streets of Paris every day about things like how much money they're spending on pensions and welfare and things like this. The economy has not grown significantly for the last 6 years. That's the country that we're talking about here, who might also be in a spot of trouble, who's coming to offer a hand of help. Does it matter that they may be going through a bit of a pickle, but are offering up a hand of help here?
That's an interesting question, because one of the best ways to solve economic crisis as a politician is to deflect them.
Okay.
I remember during Moi era, there would be a crisis, and somebody would blame a neighboring country and so on. We still do that always. So sometimes externalizing a problem becomes a solution, which is not a very good solution.
Okay.
So I can assure you that if you look at the way the summit was framed, nobody had time to ask those questions. I can tell you that. And for some reasons, we don't pay a lot of attention on France. One, because of language, and then because there's more focus on China, more focus on the US, and nowadays the Arabian countries, UAE and so on. So nobody focuses about that. And you are right that both President Macron and President Ruto are in a very similar situation, that we have internal problems, and France and in Kenya. So if you can externalize that, that would probably deflect a lot of pressure from the country. So for President Macron, that was headlines in France, possibly. That was the headline in Kenya. But we forgot about other things. Right. But you can be sure after 2, 3, 1 week, all those things will be back. That's why I agree with you that we should not shy away from the reality. And the reality is France has its own economic problems, Kenya has its own economic problems. And somebody must bear the cut. So if you look at the Kenyan situation, I was looking at the economic survey of 2026, and I saw the economy declining from about 4 point something. There was a decline of about 1%. That was significant, because if you look at the way things are, we would expect the economy to be growing.
Right.
So whether you are President Macron or President Ruto, I think the most important thing is you face the economic reality. Trading with other countries, having good summit is good. But I hope that at the end of it, it will not just be about politics, about good headlines, but about making sure that the citizens of France, the citizens of Kenya benefit from these deals. Because at the end of the day, everybody want to pay rent, everybody want to pay school fees, everybody want to eat. At the end of the day, it's about the economic reality.
Maybe, Prof, Macron is coming in a very huge, but is a bit wise because he appears to be mainstreaming his cooperation with not just Kenya but East Africa. He now wants to partner with the East African Development Bank. And these might go a long way because remember that in this particular part of the continent, even regional blocks like East African Community, we've had claims that some countries do not even remit their contribution to such blocks. We also even saw the other day nominated MPs like the East African Legislative Assembly, IALA, people like David Sankok. They were complaining they are not being paid on time because of the remissions. Will this cooperation and mainstreaming of Macron and France into the East African Development Bank maybe reawaken this particular bloc and also reawaken superpowers like Britain to see, yes, there's another entrant in that bloc that we had a footing since colonial era?
That's an interesting observation because one of my thinking, and I mentioned that area, was France getting into Kenya through all these projects would be an entry point to the rest of East Africa because Kenya is very influential.
Yes.
So if you can get to Kenya, you can get to the rest of East Africa. Some of these projects can then be scaled up into the rest of East Africa or the East African region. But as to what is happening to East African community, that has been a major concern to me.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's interesting. We are talking about a summit with France. We are talking about China. In fact, we talk about China, we talk about US, we talk about UAE, more than East African community.
More than East Africa.
So, and it's unfortunate because to me, I thought that was a starting point in our quest to become an economic bloc and develop the economy. Charity starts at home.
Yes.
So President Macron can see that these institutions are not very strong. So if they are not very strong, I can take advantage of them and go and build them in the image of France in a way that France is going to benefit.
Dictate the terms.
Remember that at the end of the day, France and other countries, China, UAE, and so on, have their strategic interests. Let's not always assume that they come here because they love us so much. No, they have their strategic interests. So when you see for the French president coming from France to Kenya, coming on the platform and telling us to keep quiet and listen and so on, I'm sure it's not because of just politics. I think he has some interest at heart. And if we don't take care of our strategic interests, somebody will take care of their own. So we need to strengthen our institutions. You can see how China has been trying to make use of African Union.
True.
Very well, even building their headquarters. Not because they love us so much, but they have their interest, they will go through that. The same way, I'm sure, I don't know again whether you are married. If you are, did you a serious man?
This is the second time.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know you probably built your mother-in-law a very good house. Is that true? If you can? Is it because you love her so much? It's because, you know, if you build your mother-in-law a very good house and so on, you have a lot of peace at home. So that's exactly what French, the Japanese and the rest are doing in Africa. They're building a house for their mother-in-law because they know...
Prof, you're dispensing wisdom this morning. Apart from...
has anybody contested my wisdom?
No, not really.
Economics is not tied to wisdom, but they are compatible.
They are compatible. Yes. They're intertwined.
Yeah. Yes. It's interesting that these conversations are being had whereby there is a call for nations to be economy-facing. And Kenya at the moment has just recently released its Finance Bill 2026, and that we can tie some of these things together. We know that the National Treasury is not just the CS's office whereby, you know, announcements of payments are going to be made every Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, but that there's a whole battalion of folks who are sitting, and the phrase I like to use, crunching the numbers in terms of what it should be. These are folks who are worth their salt, made up of economists, made up of statisticians, made up of policy, folks. They wouldn't normally know their numbers. But it seems that with every finance bill, which we were told yesterday is not necessary for you to have every year, is that it is not economy facing. Now, when we look at these big projects that the government is getting into, be they PPPs, be they be bilaterals between one country and another, like France, for example, what would it take for you to have a truly economy-facing budget, number one, or a state of things, for these numbers that we see being crunched into a 4.7 trillion shilling budget, for example, for you to really say that we are growing the economy? that we may talk about it every day, but do we really understand what it means? What would the numbers that are crunched in Treasury from the 30th of August until the 30th of April actually mean for you to now say, this is where we need money, this is where we are going to put it, appropriations, and this is where we're going to get it from?
You're asking a very interesting question, because one of the biggest inventions in the Kenya Constitution was public participation. So when the Treasury, Mandarins and others are making the budget, they always call for public participation. But do we participate?
Or do they take the participation into consideration?
So I am from the University of Nairobi, and I don't think I've had a discussion with the Treasury when they're making the business. They have not called my faculty and said, this is our budget, what is your comments?
Okay.
They assume that we are going to participate. So because Kenyans don't participate in budget making and in other political processes, the other people make the budget for them. And one of the outcome of that is we lose sense of reality. That's why you find people demonstrating on the street and say, how did you put this tax here? How did you put this and this? So unless we start participating as voters, as citizens of this country, in budgeting process, in constitutional process, in political process, wrong decisions will always be made. Because remember, politicians have their vested interest. Like now, if you look at all these big budgets that you are seeing, all these big numbers you are seeing, somebody has 2027 in mind. There's no question. Nobody will say that. But we know that 2027 is somewhere at the back of somebody's mind. So if we have to come up with good budgets, you have to come up with good political policies, then we must see beyond the politics, beyond 2027, beyond 2032. If we can transcend politics, then we can now say we are economy facing. But I've always insisted we are too much politics facing. Because remember, a politician will not be voted in or out because of tomorrow, to be because of today. So there's very high temptation that I want things that can be seen now. And that is why you find, at the end of the day, politicians like tangible projects, things that we can see.
Yes.
See, if I'm sick or if I'm been healed because of going to hospital, nobody knows. If I have a PhD, nobody knows if I walk on the streets of Nairobi. But people will see the roads, the highways, the expressway, the building, and say, this guy is doing very well. So that's why if we stop seeing things through the eyes of politics and see through economic reality, I'm sure we are going to come up with budgets that take care of common mwananchi, take care of everybody, and are intergenerational. But as long as we are braided by politics, we cannot see the reality.
So what would this look like? Because often, I guess from the point where some of us, if you see, just like you say, I guess a lot of us, we visual representation of something, it's tangible, then we can say, okay, this is now I understand. That folks may be talking economically when they say that today I have to buy a tomato for 20 shillings per tomato. And then somebody could tell you, well, that has nothing to do with the economy. It has everything to do with the fact that tomatoes don't do well in the wet season. Agriculturally, they don't. They do better when the climate is of a drier nature.
But as an economist, I will tell you, why don't you turn it into paste and keep it...
This is what I'm asking. Now we are on because I'm saying, what can you actually do? So if I think about it in the very basic terms, that a good economy is then being able to transcend space and time and season. So then you say that we have put these safeguards in place so that no matter what, then you're able to deal. Like you say, even if there is a glut, we can dehydrate our milk. Even if there's scarcity, we would have desiccated our maize so that we can use it later. How then do you say this is what we are going for, so that the person then is able to still have 3 tomatoes for 20 shillings in their pantry, whatever, in their kitchen, because of the fact that you have put safeguards into the system to ensure that no matter what, this thing will thrive? Should that be the direction in which we're going?
In fact, one Nobel laureate, Amartya Sen, is an Indian, noticed something very interesting. Democracies rarely suffer from famine. Have you ever heard the US suffering from famine? Does it mean it always rain? Does it mean it always rain in Europe? But have you ever heard them talking about famine? So all you were saying is that through democracies, you're able to put these safeguards. So that when you go to parliament, you're able to have checks and balances. When you come up with a budget, you're able to put checks and balances. Because one reason why we do so badly is because those check guards are not put into place. And when they are put into place, because we are not always very ethical, we are not always very, we always don't think about justice, they are removed. And that's why you find a lot of the decisions that are detrimental to the economy being made. And let me give you a good example that nobody is saying. I always talk about economic reality. If you look at one of the reasons why this budget is so heated is because of tax. And why is tax such a big hot issue in this country? Because right from day one, President Ruto and Kenya Kwanza government had told us they want to do away with debt.
Yes.
They want to stop borrowing. So that independence is talking about, that we want now a new global financial architecture, one of the starting point, one of the key planks is making sure that you are independent. You don't go borrowing money. But how do you stop borrowing money? You have to start getting money from taxes. And how do you raise more taxes? You have to make the economy more vibrant, more conducive for investors and consumers. And how do you make that economy very good, very suitable for investors and consumers?
Yeah.
You have to make sure there's rule of law. You have to make sure that people are confident about tomorrow. You have to make sure that people don't fear their government. You have to make sure that people are confident to spend and invest. And that's why there's that interconnectedness that we are always supposed to see between politics, economics, and the decisions we make as individuals. If we don't see that connection, we shall talk in 2032, 2037, and so on. So economics is not supposed to be that complicated. We complicate it. Because we know that if you do this, this will happen. We know that. There's nothing complicated about the economy.
It's a simple formula, isn't it? Simple formula. Simple. Input this is going to be your output.
Yeah, that is it. But the question is, vested interest make things get complicated. For example, how do we create jobs? It's very simple. Is there a demand for something? So if we start now exporting more tea, more flowers, more sugar cane to France, the farmers will produce more cane. They will make more money. They will be happy. So one of the questions that nobody is asking is, why are we not talking about exporting M-Pesa to France? Why cut flowers? Why are you not importing M-Pesa? Why are you not telling Frenchmen to start using
Why are you not being like Hungary and exporting your knowledge?
That is it.
And expertise.
Yes. The other reason why economy is supposed to do very well is that we don't do enough research to understand what is driving the economy. If I asked you, for example, what drives the economy of Makueni, you will say it is mangoes, but do you have evidence? If I ask you what drives the economy of Narok, you probably say it's people selling cattle, but do you have evidence? So I think the economic models we have are based in the West, not on the reality here. So as maybe the Treasury, the government should probably commission more research so that we understand exactly how our economy operates. So that as we make those decisions, they are based on reality.
So decisions that are being made in the past or even presently, decisions to spend money or decisions on how to appropriate or decisions about all of these things that essentially affect the economy are largely not based on any kind of research and information.
That's my worry. They are based particularly on how politicians feel. And you have seen the very many politicians go and say, we are giving you this project. We are giving you this project. But is it based on some analysis or what is it based on? Are you building this road because you feel the returns will be higher than this one or because you want more votes? So let's base our economic decisions on a reality, not politics. Let's base our taxation on a reality, not politics. If we do that, the economy is going to improve sooner than later. After all, nobody will come and improve this economy. It's not French, it's not Chinese, it's not UAE. It is us. It's our economy. We are the consumers. We are the investors.
Maybe, Prof, have we bombarded Macron and France with a lot of requests? Because here's a situation where we are many deals, more than 200, including climate change related, AI, and even the president was talking about that nuclear plant in Siaya that Ndu says I'm so enthusiastic about because that's why, of course, that's the part of the country where I come from. Remember, it was rejected by Kilifi. It's now being accepted in Siaya. The president went ahead saying that these are people with experience that dates back to immediately after Second World War. Have we bombarded them with a lot of requests that are not feasible?
There's a time I went to the countryside. One time, I'll not tell you where.
You say Shamahoho.
And I've been to Shamahoho, I've been to Osieko Beach, all those places you're talking about. I know even where the nuclear plant is going to be put. So when I was there, somebody asked me for some donation. that, by the way, we have a church project. Can you please donate some money to me? So I give that person some money. I will not give the amount. Then it was a very big family. Then in the next 5 minutes, 2 other people came to me. They told me, by the way, I also have Arambe. I don't know whether it was true or not. So I think what is happening is that the moment we found that the French can be of help to us, we bombarded them without a request. And because they also have their vested interests, they are probably more accommodating. And that's why I'm concerned whether all these projects will be implemented in the wrong land. I think that also tells you that we have not been having people like President Macron coming to visit us and having such a free conversation. So we realize this president is very kind to us, so let's make all sorts of requests. But before we even make the request to President Macron, we should also introspect and ask, what can we do for ourselves?
There you go.
What we have done for ourselves. So maybe we should be telling President Macron, we have 1 billion for nuclear power. What can you add us? We have this for this project. What can you add us? Not starting from zero.
It starts with
I
you.
think for the last 6 or 7 years, one of the problems we've had with African economy is that we have been victims of land helplessness. But other people can do better than us, not us. And I've asked this question on very many occasions. When we go demanding we want foreign investors, the first implication is there's money. That's why you're calling people to come and invest. So why don't we make that money ourselves?
Right.
Why not other people? I always ask. And there's a lady who passed away recently called Jerry Yunge. She was the founder of African Mwananchi Online, the pioneer internet service provider in Kenya. And she asked MBA students in my class that question, and I have never forgotten that. Why do you people invite people to make money? Why can't you make that money yourself? So we should also, before we invite the French, the Chinese, and the rest to come and invest in this country, we should also make it easy for ordinary people like you and me to invest and make that money.
And to make money here.
Whatever Prof is saying is true, because he's saying that at some point when he's in the village and a second person comes and says, by the way, I also have, it means the first one went and told them.
Absolutely.
If it was the Potters, the president of the United States of America coming here, do you think we'll have bombarded him with these requests? That even Mombasa Road will not even be possible for the 3 days he'll be here.
Those are the questions.
Yeah.
The question would be whether he would even be that accessible.
In the first place.
In fact, I would even become more forthright. Would he have told Kenyans to keep quiet?
Oh, that could open up a whole other can of worms, but we just don't have the time for it. Professor Iraki, thank you very much. Those words that you speak, things definitely for us to think about, if not to ignite the flame of thought in our minds. Asante Sana for joining us this part of the conversation.
Much. Let's keep talking economics.
Indeed. Good morning at 8:01.
The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.